Welcome to the Healthusiasm Podcast. Okay, that's a great start. Let's do it again. Double clap. Welcome to the Healthusiasm Podcast, a panel discussion on behaviors, innovations, and trends in health and self-care. My name is Christophe Choquet. I'm the author of the Healthusiasm books and professional keynote speaker on health, business, and technology. Now, if you're new to the Healthusiasm Podcast, you might wonder what Healthusiasm is all about. Well, Healthusiasm is the aspiration that we all have to be healthy and happy. And as a result of this, every company or organization is now more than ever focused on making their customers healthier and happier. And so every month I discuss with a panel of experts the positive changes that are shaping our health and happiness. This is episode number 18, and for this discussion we have three of your beloved experts in the panel. Calling in from Barcelona is our digital health connector, Aline Noisette.
Hola.
From Scotland, but living near Brighton, medical expert in digital innovation, Dr. Keith Grimes.
Like everybody.
And last but not least, from Ghent, Belgium, human experience expert, Mo Zouina.
Hello there.
Great to have you get back, guys. How are we doing today?
Very good.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Have you noticed that, the days are becoming longer now?
Yes, that's
which
nice.
Which is nice, right?
Yeah.
What I also noticed is that the next time we record a session will be the 22nd of March, which will be spring.
Fantastic. Been a long winter, a long and wet winter here in the UK.
Dark and grey in Belgium as well, yeah, indeed.
Well, very warm in Spain.
I will buy drinks for everyone. It's the day before my birthday.
Oh,
deal.
Double reason to celebrate.
Lovely. Okay, so we have a great show coming up. And that show will be primarily about technology, or at least perhaps more than usually, I would say, because in the last 2 weeks, some major technology updates were launched. Technologies that potentially might have or might be major game changers, and perhaps also in health and self-care. And this is what we will be talking about in this podcast. More specifically, we'll be talking about OpenAI's Sora and Apple's Vision Pro, of course. But first, some healthusiasm, some positive changes that will impact our health and happiness. So tell me, Aline, what healthusiasm did you witness in the past month?
So it was one about the thermal earring. So it's a smart wireless earring to monitor ear lobe temperature that has been developed by the University of Washington. So I think it's interesting because it's a newcomer in the wearable family. After the smartwatches, the smart rings, now we have the smart earrings. So the thermal earring has one sensor attached to the ear and another one that dangles slightly below and measure the room temp temperature. So it can actually differentiate between skin temperature and room temp temperature. It has a 28 days battery life and it can be personalized with fashion design. And I think they look really pretty, like a normal earring. And what's interesting is that researchers found that ear lobe temperatures is more sensitive than the wrist temperature, for instance, and that you can notice variation caused by eating, exercising, level of stress, ovulation. So research is still early stage, especially around continuous monitoring of ear lobe. That's pretty new, but I find it very promising. So one use case, for instance, could be fever continuous monitoring to check if an antibiotic is efficient when you give it to a patient, or even detect if food are causing inflammation, so specific food when you eat it. So so for me it was something different in the already quite crowded self-monitoring space.
Yeah, and actually I saw that one as well, and I wanted to bring it in the unusual ones, asking you what is a typical device that we haven't healthified yet, and it's indeed the earring. What is also interesting, I think, because you mentioned temperature measuring, the thermometer is 150, 170, 80 years old. The fact that we need to have a 37 degrees or 36 and a half, which is considered the normal standard, also dates from that day. So the fact that we will have more and more devices that allows you to measure your temperature continuously, as you say, I think will be very insightful to know when are you actually sick. Is it 37, 38? Maybe for you that might be a rather normal temperature, and for others it might be very high.
I think
form of inflammation.
Sorry, but if I just want to come in, one of the really interesting things about temperature is, of course, when thermometers were introduced originally back in 160 odd years ago, the medical profession pushed back very hard against this. They were very unhappy about this. They felt it was an unsafe and strange way of trying to measure the illness of people. Now, of course, thermometers at the time were very, very large devices, very large mercury-based devices too. But once again, the pushback that we have from the medical establishment against new technologies is not new. It has happened for many, many decades, and it always makes me laugh. It was the same with the stethoscope as well. But yeah, so we have to hold people's hands as we enter this new world.
Yeah, totally. Well, I'll stay with inflammation, if you will, and I'll go back to something that we discussed in episode 10 on problematic media use. It's one of our most popular episodes. If you haven't listened to it, go on Spotify or Apple Podcast to find it. Episode 10. But here I'm talking about a research that is published now in the Journal of Medical Internet Research. And it showed that the use of social media is tied to inflammation. In fact, if we study the inflammation even 5 weeks after the use of social media, the levels of inflammation is still higher. And so again, this study shows or adds to the growing amount of evidence, that if you spend too much time on social media, you might risk have a negative impact on your health. It's part of a 5-year plan, if you will, where they really want to look deeper into that relationship between social media and chronic inflammation, because we're really talking about chronic inflammation, right? Not just the acute inflammation, but the really chronic inflammation, which is typically not visible in the same manner as acute inflammation, but it is detectable, and you need to, measure the blood, and this is what we see in this study. And this is very important because, chronic inflammation and definitely its long-term effects might have an impact on your cardiovascular health, on cancer, on diabetes, or even on mental health conditions, of course, which, So a very interesting study. It's not really a healthusiasm, but I think we can get to some healthusiasm if actually the study brings some very strong results and maybe might change the way that we behave with social media. I just don't like the fact that it's 5 years, because within 5 years, I'm not quite sure where we will be with social media, but definitely it is worthwhile thinking about. So yeah, I'll stick to inflammation and information. Maybe we go to Mo. You had something in that same direction, I believe.
Yeah. Hold on to your pants, I would say, because weight loss drugs are trending. And what's interesting is that I found something that not only explains how the sales of weight loss drugs would add to the US GDP, but also the fact that the clinical outcomes realized by that drug would also add to the GDP. So some analysts have predicted that the market for weight loss drugs could reach 100 billion a year by the end of the decade, with Ozempic and Mounjaro leading the race. And the current wave of healthcare innovations like AI-powered drug discovery coupled to GLP-1 could raise the level of US GDP by 1.3% in the coming years. But what's also interesting is that thinner people means often fewer health problems and more workers. So that's also a fatter GDP. So the drug could indirectly help workplace efficiency and also productivity. So that's basically what it is. So the direct and indirect benefits of that drug, not only on clinical outcomes, but also on workplace efficiency, as Goldman Sachs says, could have an incredible increase on the US GDP. Now, the body positivity movement also raises ethical concerns, because are we swapping one set of problems for another? It's not about just slimmer wallets and thicker waistlines. It's about health, happiness, and societal norms. So maybe that would be for another discussion, and not everyone can afford these drugs. So positive, but also how interesting just one subclass of one therapeutic domain could add so much to the GDP and indirectly to workplace efficiency.
Yeah, totally interesting. And we've been talking about Ozempic and those kind of drugs for quite a while, and the impact that they had on different parts of society. I also want to talk about an impact on society, but more related to the information that we can together. And actually, I want to go back to the Consumer Electronics show from last month. It was held in Las Vegas in the beginning of January. Most of the time, it's a very funny solutions that we see there, which often creates reactions like what or why. I actually went through a lot of them. I didn't find anyone super interesting except the one that you brought up, Keith, last time, the Rabbit AIO, to go to the previous podcast to discover that. But there's actually one that I've missed that at first maybe did not seem a big deal to me, but then I came across some other articles, and when I looked a little bit closer, it actually might be a big deal. And it's related to what Abbott announced. They actually said that they would release in 1 year time about a new version of their Freestyle Libre, which is, of course, you might know, a wearable medical device that continuously measures your glucose. And it's a very valuable tool if you want to manage your diabetes, of course. Now, they announced a new version, which is called Lingo, but it fell under the radar because, to me at least, because it basically, if you will, a version 2.0 in many ways. It measures some new biometrics like ketones and lactate and alcohol. And the reason why it went unnoticed to me is because typically these companies like Abbott, these life science companies, they sell devices, or they targeted devices to physicians or for use prescribed by physicians. But now, as I could read in between the lines or in several of the articles, is that they might be targeting consumers directly. So the new Lingo devices is meant to be used and sold to consumers directly. That's how I understood it. And I know, of course, the Freestyle Libre was already indirectly sold to consumers through, several startups that are more consumer facing. But the fact that this mega big, because they're one of the biggest in the world, medtech company is potentially going directly to consumers would be a complete game changer to me. Everything remains to be seen, of course, but I'm very curious to know and to see how that market will evolve and whether they'll be doing it, because that would be super exciting to see such a massive company, medical company, going directly to consumers. Never been done before, I think, and not that I know of, but it would be having a major impact on how every one of us could actually measure a lot of things that we otherwise wouldn't be measuring. And as they say, it would help in the relationship with physicians.
It's a really interesting one, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think they've been looking at it and saying, well, they're going through a middleman or a middle company to get to these customers, and I can understand why they're thinking, well, maybe we should just take that little middle person out and go directly there. And I agree, it's a fascinating space.
Yeah,
but the value is on consumables. So if you get, it's not really, I think the algorithm is interesting, but the consumables are the recurrent revenue model, which I think they'll do a good job at that.
But I think that the most interesting part is that they're not used to put things out for consumers. The way that you do marketing, the way that you put things in the market, the investment level is totally different. And so it will be interesting to see how they would approach it if they actually will see this through. Keith, you had something related to information as well, I think, and the power of it. Is it? Yeah.
Yeah, there's an information theme here as well. You were talking earlier on about social media and information can cause inflammation. Well, my Healthusiasm is about how information can reduce inflammation, specifically from a paper talking about information as a new independent determinant of health. So for those that want to see it, it was published just recently on the 13th of February in Nature. And within this, it was a discussion by a number of authors about how, particularly given the experience of what happened during the pandemic, that there's an increasing recognition that information in and of itself, the access to the information, the quality of the information, and how that information is connected, has a direct impact on morbidity and mortality, on illness and death. And I think if we think of all our own experience of having gone through the pandemic a few years ago, the critical importance of being kept up to date and the very changing nature of information until we got up to the vaccinations was the principal way in which we managed this. And studies have since shown that actually it was this information that had the biggest impact on morbidity and mortality pre-vaccination. And so recognizing this and going a little bit deeper is something I think that is adding evidence to something that people working in healthcare, and I think actually the wider population have known all along. Knowledge and education and how we communicate information determines how well a person lives their life, how healthy they are. Now, whilst that's positive and it gives us a lot of hope about how we can use some of these new technologies to positively influence people, equally, it indicates the damage that things like misinformation, conspiracy theories, AI leading to fake information, all of that can have a direct impact on the health of the population, which is scary and needs to be managed. And then on the flip side of that, while information might be an independent determinant of health, it's really quite closely tied to the social determinants, which we're all increasingly aware of. And you just have to look at those populations that are either in poorer groups who have poorer access. One of the statistics was that 26% of Medicare benefit recipients do not have access to the data and computing they need to get access to this information. And then if you look in sub-Saharan Africa, up to the maximum of 45% of the population have access to a mobile or data network at all. So good news that we're understanding the power of information and we can put this into place. But unless we're careful, it's just yet another reason that some people might miss out. So I think it's a really interesting paper. It's a nice short paper too. It reminds us of what we've already known, but it also reminds us of the power that we hold in our hands, those of us that communicate.
Yeah, I fully agree. And I think what we sometimes underestimate is that people want to know. Maybe they're not in the position to understand, or maybe they don't always know because they don't have access to the information, as you said. But as I write in my second book now, is like one of the biggest life aspirations is consciousness, which is something different than awareness, right? Awareness is you might be aware of something but not fully understand it, not fully comprehend it. But the fact that you are conscious about something means that you actually understand and comprehend it. And I think this is one of the things that we need to be working on very hard in health and self-care. I'll give the last one to you, Aline. You still had one you wanted to add?
Yeah, there was an interesting news in the women's health space. So it's a new menopause app that was launched by the Menopause Hub, which is the Ireland's first dedicated menopause clinic. And that app will allow women to track and monitor their menopause symptoms with the idea to help researchers to develop new treatments. And we know it's a big deal, like the menopause, we don't talk about it enough, and research is not here yet. So it will include information and research about the hormonal changes women experience during menopause and provide also valuable insights into the effectiveness of current therapies. And so the app was developed by the Dublin-based company Zendra Health and co-created with women undergoing menopause. I think that's very important as well.
Yeah, lovely. And again, we're talking information, data and information. I think all the Healthusiasms were almost about information, right? So this is one of the most important things that we see. To round this off, I have, per usual, some unusual ones. And I'll start with you, Keith. So we heard that Pluto is no longer a planet. But now, potatoes may from 2025 no longer be a vegetable. Why is that?
My goodness, potatoes. I'm still reeling from Pluto not being a planet and then being a planetoid and so on. All right, okay, so potatoes no longer being a vegetable. Well, I suppose the first question is, what are they? I do know that potatoes are related to some very toxic plants and can be toxic themselves. My mother's a gardener and was warning me about deadly nightshade and belladonna and so on. So I suppose which way can they go? If a potato is no longer considered a vegetable, then are they going to be reclassifying it as a fruit?
Not as a fruit, but it's indeed a reclassifying, and it's driven by the U.S. Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee. And they're using 5 categories, right? Dairy, fruits, grains, protein, vegetables. Most of the time, what we say is that you need to eat most of all vegetables. But if you consider a potato a vegetable, then you might eat too much vegetables. And so what they want to do is they want to no longer consider a potato being a vegetable, but they want to turn it into a grain, or at least a stable food, if you will.
Understood. That does make sense. I understand that, yes, because
Keith,
a plate full of fruit can be an issue.
Keith, you don't know what that means for the Belgian population.
Well, I have a sense.
Potatoes not being a vegetable anymore This is
Yeah,
chaotic.
dramatic.
And also potatoes not being a vegetable means that vodka doesn't count either.
By the way, Pluto is technically a dwarf planet, and the reason is because it still has in its near region other objects flying around. So normally planets have already absorbed those asteroids and space rocks that are very close to it. And so they discovered there's a lot of things going on and around Pluto, and that's why they don't no longer consider it a planet. To you, Aline, one for you. What is tree.fm? Tree.fm. It's as in a tree. What could it be?
I would think of a radio channel.
Correct. Correct.
But 3 dots.
It's a website, so it's tree.fm. What could it be?
I don't know.
Anybody else?
Then I'm going to say maybe this is a website that has wired up a tree and broadcasts the electrical activity within a tree as a radio signal.
No, but that sounds pretty fascinating.
Maybe it's just the sound of the wind going through the leaves that calms people down.
Yeah, so actually what you can do, I mean, people upload on this website all tunes from the forests in the neighborhood. And you can use those sounds to escape, to relax. That's kind of like more like a meditation website. So it's indeed tree, as in the tree that grows from the ground up, .fm. Mo left the most difficult one for you. It's very hard to guess it, but there's a link to our previous show which was on love, sex, and relationships, where you made a statement about we're having less long-term relationships, we're even having less sex. But I'm happy to tell you that a guy from Russia used ChatGPT to find his wife. What did he do?
What did he do? He found ChatGPT to find. He used ChatGPT to find his wife.
Yeah, he used ChatGPT in some way, to find some form or other to.
What do you mean find his wife? Did he lose her?
No. He got out of a relationship and he wanted to find a new wife.
Okay.
And within 2-3 years' time, he did find a wife and got married to her.
Like a real person?
Like a real person, yeah.
Maybe he asked ChatGPT the best way to approach the problem, and then he systematically upped his game.
Good one. That's a good one. It's close. I mean, what he did was that he programmed ChatGPT to swipe through Tinder. And so he automated everything related to Tinder, and he got about 5,239 matches. And it was trained in that way that it matched his preferences. So he filtered out profiles with photos of alcohol or zodiac signs in their biographies or any other nuances, so that he can immediately find a certain match. And then ChatGPT even had the first conversations with the women to see whether it really matched. So he went through about over 5,000 women, dated 100 of them in 2 years' time, which is considerably well done, let's say. And then after a short while, he took over the conversations from on Tinder when they were lasting a little bit longer, when ChatGPT was kind of like approving what was going on. And then he actually found out that she wanted to marry him, and he did pop the question.
For a minute, I thought this was like a modern retelling of Cyrano de Bergerac.
Anyway, thank you for all your healthusiasms. And yep, it is a healthusiasm world indeed. So many positive changes are making our world a little healthier and happier every day. If you want to know more about these healthusiasms, go to healthusiasm.com, discover the other episodes, and subscribe to our newsletter. But now let's move to the next segment of the Healthusiasm podcast. Is it something, nothing, or everything?